Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
For almost a month now, we've all been fixated on this Aryan Khan-Wankhede case in Mumbai. And chances are that by the time you start listening to this week's National Interest, Aryan would have walked out of jail, although in my view, 25 days too late. Why do I say so? Because everything we know about the case, everything tells us there was nothing to justify his arrest, his incarceration and being charged under such a draconian law in any case. His ordeal, however, has produced another star of sorts, and I say star in single quotes, star of sorts, that is Samir, middle name Dawood or Gyandev Wankhede. Now, he's become a star, although not of the kind that he may have wanted to be. Nevertheless, what kind of star, good or bad, a wronged hero or a villain who finally got caught out, you can decide. Because he's a polarizing figure. For some, he's a reservation fraud who allegedly told a lie about his caste and hid the fact that he's a Muslim, because if he was a Muslim, nothing wrong with that, a Muslim being in any of the All India or Class 1 or Central services. But to get selected in the scheduled caste quota, he used caste and hid his religion. Some people believe that. Some people think that he's a victim. In fact, that he's a Muslim and a Dalit and yet is being victimized by entitled elites only because he dared to go after them. So both these views exist. We don't have sufficient facts to take a position one way or the other. Now for some, again, he's a bully and probably a blackmailer, right? Who targeted the rich and the famous, especially in Bollywood, for fame and allegedly for ransom. That's what that other witness has said, and some of those allegations also Nawab Malik of NCP has been making. For others, he's finally the one brave narc who has the courage to do his job, no matter how powerful his quarry. So once again, we cannot take sides on this, not because we are afraid of taking sides, but because we do not have all the facts. Our instinct, you might say, what's your instinct? Our instinct comes from subjectivity, because that's how we'd see the facts arrayed before us. We shall get off the curb on this, that's why. So I will not debate whether he's right or wrong or which side is correct on him, and focus on something else, something which is less tangible but not at all polarizing. It is called propriety in government service, particularly in Class 1 services, All India services, IAS, IPS, IRS. Now let me ask you a trick question at this point. How many IAS officers can you name in the country right now? Your cousins, brothers, sisters, parents, children, neighbors, school friends are excluded. But people who you might know from their prominence or fame, how many can you name for me right now? Or IPS officer for that matter. And finally, that one service that we interact with in our normal lives so rarely, that is the Indian Revenue Service. We are quite happy if we don't have to interact with the proverbial taxman or woman, and if at all, we can always trust a chartered accountant to talk to them on our behalf. So if I asked you to name just one IRS officer in the country off the bat, I bet it would be Samir Wankhede. Now, he's not only the most famous IRS officer in the country today, but in a very long time. It is serendipitous that the two most headlined names from the other Class 1 or All India services at this point, IAS and IPS, have also not necessarily been there for good reasons, in the headlines I mean. So, former Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Vinod Rai, gave a grovelling apology to Congress leader Sanjay Nirupam because he made an allegation against him in an interview that he had tried to put pressure on him to keep Dr. Manmohan Singh out of his 2G report. Now that one apology, already so many questions have been raised about his 2G report, and the fact is that India's telecom sector has been decimated essentially because of the aftermath of that report, that this has further raised questions on what he has done, because this really knocks his credibility greatly, an apology of this kind. Now in that case, he had conjured up a loss of 1.76 lakh crores, and mind you, the report was produced, the CAG report came out in 2010 at the peak of the Anna phase, so it fed into that that frenzy that was going on, sab chor hai, mera neta chor hai, etc. But the deal was of 2007, and some of us would dare to point out that in 2007, 1.76 lakh crore, 1,76,000 crore rupees was $2 billion more than all of India's defense budget. Army, Navy, Air Force. Could the value of this much spectrum in 2G be more than India's defense budget? But then the risk was that if you question those figures, if you question the holy, venerable National Accountant General, then you risk being labeled pro-corrupt. So that mythology got built. The same thing happened soon enough with coal. Now that those stories have unraveled, as indeed India's telecom sector and the coal sector, we've seen the crisis there also. Now let's come to the IPS. We've looked at IRS, IAS, let's look at IPS. The same Mumbai which produced Wankhede, the zonal narcotics chief, who now in his own defense is citing the testimony of the young man, he charged with a crime with a possible 10-year sentence. That's Aryan Khan. So he's now telling the court, see, even Aryan Khan says he made no charge of extortion against me. So I'm innocent, right? Same city of Mumbai has given us a police commissioner who's absconding. So all of Maharashtra police cannot find one of its most senior officers, prominent, eminent, well-known, everybody knows his pictures, never shy of publicity. Non-bailable warrants are being posted everywhere for him. So you have IPS, IRS and IAS, the trinity of our wanted class 1 services, and Parambir Singh, Sameer Wankhede and Vinod Rai as their representatives in today's most prominent and bad headlines. What does it tell us, and what does it tell these services? Now, I have deliberately chosen this order. Somebody might say, why have you put IPS ahead of IRS and IPS and IRS both ahead of the IAS? So, I have deliberately chosen that hierarchy. IPS first because the guy from IPS is actually an absconder, ducking a lot of serious IPC charges. These are not traffic offences, these are serious IPC charges. And he's absconding now for some time. So IPS gets the top slot. Number 2, IRS, simply because he's in court seeking protection from arrest and is yet to answer 100 questions on his conduct. The person or the people he arrested after having been incarcerated for more than 3 weeks are being released because there is apparently very little against them, as there was very little against Riya Chakraborty and others, her brother and others, who were arrested in the earlier phase of the same kind of a publicity campaign. And IAS comes last for once because at least one thing we know about Vinod Rai from reputation and track record is that he's financially spotless. In fact, now even his colleagues, his batchmates, they may hate his guts for his fame, for what he did at CAG or what he did to Indian cricket, but even they say that he's financially spotless. Just that, however honest he might be personally, it hasn't worked very well in India's interests. These 3 stars of today speak poorly of our class 1 services in their own different ways. It is to fight for these services that lakhs of our brightest young men and women slog for years at coaching institutes, often making their parents sell their land and buffaloes in that one hope, my kid will crack UPSC. Then they walk into their respective academies with pride in their hearts, stars in their eyes, and mostly with a great deal of idealism. I speak from experience of having spoken at these academies at various points of time and interacted with many young recruits over the past couple of decades. No, I am not about to lapse into a convenient sab chor hai mass condemnation. Mine has never been that view. In fact, my view is absolutely to the contrary, that most people are honest, and I dare to say this even during the bizarre Anna Hazare months. The point here is, for every Parambir Singh, there are thousands of others doing their jobs honestly, sincerely, and at very modest government salaries, as there must be in IAS and IRS. It is just that we do not know about them. It is just that people who are becoming famous have done so for all the wrong reasons, and that is what we are complaining about today. So let me ask you some trick questions again. Name for me the last 6 incumbents each in the office of the Cabinet Secretary, Director of the Intelligence Bureau, and Chairperson of the Central Board of Direct Taxes. These three officers sit on the apex of these three services. If you can name even 6, because when I say 6 in each, I give you a choice out of 18. Even if you can name 6 out of 18, I will say fantastic, you are a brilliant person. The chances are that you won't know. But you know the 3 names in the headlines today, sadly, or some of you might recall the name of the young IAS officer who was caught on camera asking his police to smash the heads of the farmers in Haryana, or also one in Chhattisgarh bashing away passerby on camera for defying the lockdown, and other such people. Good guys go unnoticed, unsung. And it is tragic because they are straight, professional and play by the book. They are the very large majority. Now, what is that book? When we say play by the book, what is that book? The Bollywood deserves our eternal gratitude because it can always make a telling point for us. No need to Google some classics or no need to Google some quotable quotes. No need to make a meme either. So people dug out this clip from Tiranga, the film made by Mehul Kumar in 1993. It was a noisy nothing of a movie. But the clip from the film is Rajkumar in his characteristic drawl, which is so easy to mimic. He pulls out 2 papers from his pocket to confront a corrupt police officer. And he says, these are for you. One is the order of my release and the other is the order for your arrest. Now this clip is being shared quite widely with the caption, Aryan Khan tells Wankhede. Now go to the movie on YouTube and listen to the context of that clip. Rajkumar asks the cop, what oath do you take when you join this service, when you don this uniform, he asks. And then reads out the oath every Indian joining All India services or Class 1 services mandatorily takes, and then reads out in Hindi the oath every Indian joining All India services or Class 1 services takes, which is like usual oath. I do swear or solemnly affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Constitution of India, and that I will carry out the duties of my office loyally, honestly and impartially. We shall leave it to the conscience of these latest superstars of Class 1 services to ask themselves if they've been true to this oath. It's also a question that many others in the services need to ask themselves. As they lock up students for sedition and UAPA only because of the cricket team they support, or for sharing Greta Thunberg's toolkit, or trumping up charges against anybody they believe that political leaders, political bosses want fixed today, and बाद में देखा जाएगा, कोर्ट में देखते रहेंगे, but process is the punishment because you can throw charges at an innocent person. That innocent person will take 5 years and lots of expense in the courts proving his or her innocence. Meanwhile, you can have all kinds of muck spread about them. Now, these are only a few people. But in 2021, by which time we are so much more evolved than in the early 50s or late 40s, they are today's 2021 equivalent of Lavrenti Beria. Who was Lavrenti Beria? He was Stalin's favorite, notorious, infamous hatchet man. And the story goes that once Stalin got irritated with somebody and Beria said, I will arrest so-and-so. And Stalin said, but under what charge? He said, you name the man, I will give you the charge. So is that the way to go for people who join these great services in the country? Again, a vast majority doesn't do it. A few people do it. Again, they become famous. In some cases, they become infamous. In many cases, they benefit. In many cases, there is also a reckoning at some point of time when governments change, or at some point of time when not that often, but still often enough, justice strikes back. So they have to figure out if it is worth it. So I can do no better than conclude from some lines from S.S. Kheda. S.S. Kheda was the Cabinet Secretary of India between 1962 and 1964. He was among the doyens and founders of All India Services. He was also India's first Sikh Cabinet Secretary, and in fact, he had earned his fame in 1947 when, to stop riots in Meerut, he even called out the tanks, right? And that stopped the riots in Meerut. So he had this sizable reputation, Cabinet Secretary 62-64. He was so self-effacing and so opposed to the idea of civil servants seeking publicity that even if you Google him, you will find very little about him, maybe about a book, but very little else about him. He used to say famously, one mention in the newspaper headlines is one black mark. Two mentions in newspaper headlines are a bad ACR, annual confidential report. And a photo in a newspaper should invite the sack. Now, we know times have changed in 6 decades or 6.5 decades. But we also see what this madness for fame and stardom has done to some people in our great services, even as most others work sincerely in relative anonymity.